We're from the western part of North Carolina, near Asheville. Any of you been to North Carolina? You're probably well-traveled people. All the way back to the North Carolina Falls, I think. We've been there a long time. Buncombe County's where Asheville is, so now you know where Buncombe County is. My daddy's family's from Mitchell County. And I remember going up there with my granddaddy one time when I was a little kid back to his old home place, and we were walking around. I said, how in the world what did you grow here? He said, well, mostly I growed corn. I said, but it's so steep, how would you even plant corn? He said, oh, son, there wasn't nothing to it. Just load your shotgun with corn, walk out on the front porch. Well, evidently there was a gunpowder shortage one year, and the corn crop didn't turn out. And Granddaddy was down at the store in Beuladine there, and there was a fella handing out pamphlets that said, if you'll move to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and go to work in a cotton mill, we'll buy you a train ticket down there, your wife a train ticket, all your children train tickets, and your cow a train ticket to Spartanburg. Well, who wouldn't want to take their cow to Spartanburg? So they did, moved down there. My dad grew up in the mill village in Spartanburg down there. And I only got to see that grandfather about once a year. They got off on the 4th of July. We'd go down there, and I remember thinking, Spartanburg, South Carolina is the hottest place in the world, but that's before I'd ever been to Columbia. If you've ever been to Columbia, South Carolina, it's hotter than Tulsa, I'll bet you. Anyway, we spent every Christmas at my mom's family's in a little place in western North Carolina there, a little cove in the mountains. And we'd go over there every other weekend. Mama called it going home. It's 3.5 hours on 2-lane mountain roads to get there, but we'd go and stay as late as we could stand on Sunday night and then drive home in the dark and get home at 2 o'clock in the morning. But we loved it. That's where all my cousins were, It was my family. We were on our way to Christmas when I was 10. And we drove through the mountains. We were all excited to get there. We pulled up in my Aunt Azalee and Uncle Server's yard. And my Aunt Azalee was standing on the back porch waiting for us. And as soon as we pulled in the driveway, she came running to the car, and Dad rolled down the window, and she said, they've called trying to find you. Your daddy's died down in Spartanburg. So we got in the car. Well, we didn't even get out of the car. We just told everybody we'll be back when we can. We went to Spartanburg and buried my granddaddy down there in the cemetery. Came back, and it was 2 days before Christmas when we got back. And we pulled up in the driveway, and everybody went in the house, and I went and sat down on the front steps of Aunt Azalee's house and started crying because I was 10 years old and didn't have a grandfather. Because my mom's dad had died in 1941 and I wasn't born in 1948, so I never got to know him. His name was Motorcycle Eddie Cole. I think it's on his birth certificate, I swear it. Everybody in western North Carolina knew him as that because he had a 1913 Indian V-twin motorcycle, the first year of the Indian V-twin, and people said he rode it everywhere he went. Now, I knew everything about that grandfather that I've never met. I knew a lot more about him than I did the one I only saw once or so a year because I knew his best friend. His best friend was a man named Old Man Stover Mason. I think it was on his birth certificate, Old Man Stover Mason. And Stover told me stories about my grandfather, so that's how I knew everything about Ed Cole. Well, I was sitting there feeling sorry for myself because I was a 10-year-old boy with no grandfather, crying on the front steps. Like I said, everybody else was in the house getting ready for Christmas, and I was feeling sorry for myself. About that time, this old 1.5-ton International State Bed truck pulled up in the driveway, and it was Stover Mason, come to wish us Merry Christmas. He got out of the truck and walked around the front toward the back door. The back door, the only door anybody had ever been in and out of since 1937, probably. But evidently he heard something and he stopped, and he walked around and pulled back an azalea bush and saw 10-year-old me sitting there on the steps crying. Now me and Stover were tight. He was He was one of our family. He and my grandfather had grown up together. They'd born a quarter mile apart and 3 days apart in that little cove of the mountains that my mother was from. The cove, it's called the Milksick Cove. Milksick Cove. I remember asking Stover one time, I said, why in the world do you think anybody would have named someplace the Milksick Cove? And Stover studied on that a minute and he said, well, son, I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of lactose intolerant people. I thought Stover had seen everything in the world. Stover was almost 25 years old when 2 bicycle mechanics left Ohio and came to North Carolina and made the first powered airplane flight at Kitty Hawk. And Stover and I sat together in 1969, and he watched another man from Ohio by the name of Neil Armstrong step on the moon. I thought, this man has seen everything. Well, as a matter of fact, one of the most common things Stover would say when you mentioned anything was, I remember when they come out with him. He'd seen it all, you know. Well, he came over there and sat down next to me, scooted up next to me and put his arm around me, whispered in my ear. He said, son, what in the world's happened to you here? Something's gone wrong with you. What is it? And I looked up at him and I said, he said, honey, I can't understand the thing you're saying here. He said, here, blow your nose. I said, why don't you just keep that? Thank you. He said, now can you talk? I said, yes, sir, I think so. He said, what's happened? I said, my granddaddy died in Spartanburg and I don't have a grandfather anymore. He said, oh, honey, he said, I hadn't heard nothing about this. Oh, good Lord, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, he said, we've got to do something about this. I said, what do you think we could do about it? He said, well, anytime you got a big thing like this happens in your life, you need to think and think carefully and get yourself a plan how you're going to pull through it. Now, Stover thought that the best way to think was to whittle. And he thought that the best whittling wood for thinking was white pine. But he said, it gives off a smell that clears your head, makes you think better. And for some reason, he had it in his head that the best thinking wood in the country come from the western slope of the Blue Ridge Mountains. So when he'd run out of thinking wood, he'd drive his truck over to East Tennessee, cut down one white pine tree, bring that back, put it up on the sawbucks in his backyard, cut it into sections about that long, quarter that, split off little pieces of kindling that he'd used to start his kitchen stove, and keep one in that left rear pocket for thinking. He said, all right, he said, it's time to think. And he got out this little case double-X pocket knife right here. He opened it up to this blade right here, which he always referred to as his tooth-picking and whittling blade. Not to be confused with this other blade here, which he always referred to as his apple peeling and hog castrating blade. I've never had the nerve to even open that one. But anyway, he got out that stick of Tennessee white pine and he said, all right, let's start here. Now he thought the thinner the shaving, the better the thinking. And he got him a little thin shaving started. And he pushed it and put, oh yeah, oh this is a going, I'm a thinking on her now, watch this. He got one little turn on it, about thin as a human hair, and he stopped and said, huh. Oh, this, stay with me now. He got about 3 turns on it. He said, oh, there it is, we've got her now. He pushed that little thing right off at the end of that stick, blew on it like that, and it floated her off like a dandelion seed on the breeze. He shut that knife up, stuck it back in that pocket, took that stick of Tennessee white pine, stuck it back in his hip pocket and said, I've got it. I said, what are we going to do? He said, well, I ain't got a grandson, you ain't got a grandfather, why don't we adopt one another? I said, can we do that? He said, well, I don't see why not. People adopt each other all the time. I said, well, wouldn't we need paperwork on something like that? He said, well, sure, you gotta have paperwork, something big like this. He got up, walked over to that old International truck, reached in the passenger side window, mashed that button on the dash, the door come open, he reached in, got a receipt for a set of tires. Walked over where I was sitting there, sat down on the step next to me, turned that yellow sheet of paper down on its face, reached in the big pocket of his overalls, pulled out a little stub of a pencil, licked her twice, and he wrote, I, Stover Mason, adopt Michael Reno Harrell as my grandson, Stover Mason. He said, now you. I took it and I wrote, I, Michael Reno Harrell, adopt Stover Mason as my grandfather, Michael Reno Harrell. He said, now fold that up and put it where you keep your baseball card so you won't lose it. I said, it'll be in that cigar box under my bed when I get home next week. He said, now, honey, do you feel better? I said, well, yes, sir. I said, of course, we're not blood. He said, we can fix that. I can show you the scar right there. We cut palms and held them together, and from then on, Michael Reno Harrell had a grandfather, and Stover Mason had a grandson. I've got my granddaddy's pocket knife and a good dry stick of Tennessee white pine. Is sitting heavy on my shoulders like it does from time to time. And if I just wind up with shavings on my shoes, that'll be just fine. 'Cause then the problems of my world are nothing more than curls of Tennessee white pine. I can feel his steady hand here on the staghorn handles of his favorite tool. He taught me there's a lesson in the blade and what it means to break the rules. He said there's a right way and a wrong way, and it'll catch you if you try and cross the line. But there are a lot of lessons to be learned from pocket knives and Tennessee white pine. See this angry looking scar here? 7 stitches on the pad of my right thumb. Well, that's a notch carved in the door frame to my brain to remind me that I'm done. Still I'll drive 1,000 miles to keep from flying on some damned airline. I can bring my pocket knife and a good dry stick of Tennessee white pine. Need to rub it on a whetstone every day. Use a drop of 3-in-1. You'll know it's right if you can shave the hair off of your arm when you get done. This old double-X case pocket knife is like a touchstone to my favorite memories. It's a direct line from here to when I was a boy back there in Tennessee. I say, most every day I find it good to spend a little time with my granddaddy's pocket knife and a good dry stick of Tennessee white pine. Like I say, most every day I find it good to spend a little time with my granddaddy's pocket knife and a good dry stick of Tennessee white pine. Stover died in his backyard one Sunday morning. His neighbor came to get him, to haul him. He'd gotten to where he couldn't drive anymore because it wasn't because he couldn't see, he couldn't hear anymore. So he was afraid a logging truck could be coming down on him, he wouldn't hear it, so he quit driving. And his neighbor was coming to take him to church at Snow Hill Methodist. And she knocked on the front door and he didn't come to the door, so she walked around to try the back door and she found him laying by his little chopping block there. Had about 6 sticks of Tennessee white pine in a little cardboard box there that he'd chopped off with his little axe, and he just laid down next to it and went on to his reward. Stover Mason died 3 days before my 34th birthday. He was 104 and still splitting kindling.